Well, hello and welcome to a new podcast. What's happening? There's new music. There's a new intro. I have some explaining to do. There has been a slight change. I have been promising this for a little while now, so I feel like most of you are in the know. But if you only happen to listen to the podcast, and you might be very confused because even the thumbnail is different. Heck, even the name is different. So what's going on? I'm going to explain to you everything about the rebranding, what Friendo podcast is, why we chose to rebrand. I say we because I feel like Dean has helped me with this quite immensely, and what's going to be happening for 2021 and how this is going to change the podcast for the better. I'm excited to share with you what's going on. Let's do it. If you're catching the video version of this podcast, you will notice my shirt. I've got the awesome Friendo t-shirt on. It's the pink one. I'm quite, I like a little pink every now and then. In fact, today I just got my delivery in and I got a pink one and a yellow one because yellow is my color of the year. And I'm bringing in all the good energy for 2021. So what's happening? Why the rebrand? I launched and started this podcast, The Sandwich, in 2018. Now that's like some time ago, And at the time, the podcast meant one thing to me. And I feel like over time it's evolved and it no longer is this little, side piece thing that I occasionally threw some attention at. I feel like now it is its own well-oiled machine, or at least that's what my intent is for this. So much has changed for the entire world in the last 11 months, but also so much has changed for my little family. And with Dean being home, we've really been trying to rack our brains about how he can get more involved with the business side of things in what I do. I've always felt that there's more that I could be doing, but I'm just one person and there's simply not enough time in the day. And I'm trying to break free from the hustle culture, So what does one do when they have ideas and they just have limited time? But people, I started to have discussions with Dean about what could this podcast be? What would a new project look like? I've had this idea for a brand of my own for a little bit of time, but not quite knowing how to piece it all together. And basically in the spring, or I guess it was the summer, we really started to just think about what could this look like? What could a new project look like for us? And as you let things kind of simmer, Friendo came to be. And I think that there's definitely a few ways a person, could share what Friendo is. But basically, let's just get to the bare bones of it. Pretty much every video I've ever started, I've always said, hi friends, and really looked at you, my community members, as friends. I share like friends do. There's moments I've cried, I've laughed, I've, shared highs and lows, big life changes, big moves, a baby. You name it, I've shared with you guys because that's what friends do. So friends has always been something. And, when Dean and I were talking about it, we started to just play around what is this friendship about? How did it become a friendship? What is it? It's kind of one-sided because I share so much and I don't get to hear so much from your side of things aside from DMs and comments. And Dean had mentioned, your friendship is connected through the lens of a camera. And he kind of did one of these, with his hands, if you're catching the video, but basically bringing your hands together in the shape of an O, and it's like the circle of a lens, Friendo, boom. So I was like, oh, Friendo. And I will occasionally call Dean that. I'll be like, thank you, Friendo, or, just little playful names like that. And then I was like, well, wait, that's kind of a great idea because what is the podcast? Well, The Sandwich up until this point has been definitely a place for conversations, layered conversations, as I've always said, like the idea of a layered sandwich, something you can take a bite out of. So definitely playing off that name. But I found that it then kind of evolved to be more of an audio journal, which, hey, those are great too. I've had lots of great conversations with you guys in vulnerable moments, but I want this to be more. I had a vision of, what could this podcast be? And so we've changed it to be more of community conversation, friendship. And in doing so, I have invited you guys, the listener, to put forward a submission to be a guest on my show. And I'm looking to celebrate stories of people, just people with platforms, with Instagrams, with YouTubes, and also people with none of those things, because at the end of the day, those platforms, those numbers are cool, but they don't actually change your worth or your value as a human being, right? So somebody might have this really fascinating story, but they just don't have a platform to share because that's not what they do. But maybe they could tell me their story and then I can share it with you guys. And I'm really excited. So it's celebrating stories. If you have like a really neat job or a hobby that just floats your boat, or some sort of skill that we just should be talking about, or, any of the above, and perhaps just not too shy and want to talk to me, then I'm really looking forward to sharing these stories. And so as I'm talking to you right now and recording this episode, I already have one episode recorded. I've got 6 more interviews coming up. I mean, that's already 6 weeks, 7 weeks of content. Like, I'm blown away, honestly. Like, I knew the conversations would be amazing. I knew that the opportunity would be pretty unique. I wasn't sure if people would be into submitting stories, but you are, and I'm here for it. So get ready. There is a change coming, the winds of change, but it's not going to be too different from what I already do. One of the things that I wanted to ensure from a creator standpoint for the podcast is that it definitely followed a more structured format, so that when I have a guest, I can just plug and play. Like, here's the questions, here's what we're going to talk about. We have an intro, we have a middle, we have an outro. That kind of stuff is important creatively when you're just a party of one kind of working on things, A lot of podcasts, a lot of YouTube channels tend to have teams of people working on this. And so I had to be realistic with my resources and what I'm capable of, right? So, because honestly, I hate committing to stuff that I can't follow through. And honestly, that's kind of been bugging me about the sandwiches. I feel like I've dropped the ball a few times because I had to focus on other things. So this format really allows me to stay structured. So what is that format, you may ask? So what you're going to find with every episode is the show will start with a little friend-to-friend chat with me. So a heartfelt chat generally about the topic that we're going to be discussing, and in a way that it relates back to my life personally. So we're going to have that little friend-to-friend moment. And then it's going to carry on into the conversation and interview with my friendo guest. So get into it. All the amazing stories that you have been sharing with me. I can't wait to share this. And so we're going to have the friendo guest. And then it's going to end with a debrief with my man friend, Dean. So Dean and I are going to debrief about the episode and, how things are going and pertaining to our life at the moment. And that's going to be every episode. So I feel like it encompasses everything that I've noticed you guys enjoy about the podcast. It has the moments with me just by myself. It has an interview that is pertinent and relevant to things going on in the world right now. And then it also includes a fun, debrief and recapping of the episode with Dean. I would love to hear your feedback once we get the show rolling and how you find things to be going. There is, some finessing that has happened in terms of we've updated the theme, the soundtrack, the thumbnail is going to look a little different. It's going to be called Friendo Podcast. However, if you're already subscribed to The Sandwich, you don't have to do anything. It'll pop up in your podcast library when a new show is released. And there you go. So at the moment, I release YouTube videos on Tuesday and Thursday. And the plan is to also release the podcast on Wednesdays. So today with the intro, there is also a brand new episode, episode 1, featuring the first friendo guest. And it's all about reinvention and the pivot after job loss, which I think is really relevant right now because so many of us have had to shift the way we do things and how we work and generate an income. So I hope you enjoy that conversation. So that's already available today. Go check it out. And you're also going to notice that throughout the episode, there will be some ad spots and ads here and there because with Friendo launching and Dean helping and working on this project, I am hoping that it is another, income resource for us that we can tap into and keep the show afloat, if you will, because it takes a lot of time. Like just last night, I sat here for 2 hours preparing the next 6 episodes, getting the questions ready, getting all the interviews set up. Like there's actually quite a bit of admin that goes on behind the scenes. So all of your support is directly allowing me to create this show, and I'm really excited about it. On the news of support, with the brand launching, we also launched a shop. So if you haven't checked it out, there's going to be a link in the show notes. You can find us at hellofriendo.com. And there you will find the shop along with the area that you can apply to be a guest on the podcast. So feel free to apply. It's taking me a couple days to get back to emails because there's actually quite a bit of submissions. And so keep that in mind. But if you think you have a story to tell, I would love to hear it, and we can go from there. But you'll also find items in the shop. And so at the moment, we have shirts like the Friendo shirt that I'm wearing, this cute little Friendo shirt, pink with a little bird. We have hoodies and mugs and stickers. And then actually, I just released today a few new items in the shop. So you're going to find a toque. I believe there's a tote bag, and I'm really excited to be able to add more things that you might find interesting as we go in the shop. So definitely keep a look out there as we're going to be constantly adding new things. We have a special item that we're going to be making here in the AmandaMuse headquarters with the kids actually getting involved. And it's really exciting. And it's becoming a little family business, and it is something I never dreamed would happen, but here we are. And sometimes you just gotta put one foot in front of the other and walk towards what you believe in. And sometimes magic can happen, right? Hard work, opportunity. So I'm really excited for the change. I hope you are too. It's going to be the same old me having conversations. It's going to be a little bit more structured and definitely far more regular with shows on a weekly basis. And what's of course incredible is that having all these amazing guests submit their stories and of course share them with me keeps me like 100% accountable, because it's not just me sharing a story about me. It is guests and interviews, and I will likely do the occasional one-off solo episode, but my hope is truly to bring you guys into the fold and create this type of friendo and friendship that allows me to share your stories as well, because I wouldn't be here doing the things that I get to do without your continued support. And I'm just excited to have this chance to share your stuff. So, if you're a business owner and you have a passion about what you do in your business, tell me what that passion is. I have a really interesting guest coming up who started a business out of her home because of a need she felt in the world that she's creating in, without giving too much away. And she started a business from a real passion, a place of passion and a passion project. So those are the kind of stories I want to hear, interesting hobbies, maybe adventures you've had that you think are worthy of sharing. And also try to let that imposter syndrome just vanish, because everybody's got a story. Everybody has something unique that they bring to the table, and I want to hear about it. So I'm pumped. And I guess that's the update. So be sure to follow along here wherever you find podcasts. If you can rate and review Friendo Podcast on Apple Podcasts. That really helps our show get rated and of course get into more ears, which is in turn helps grow the show. You can also follow us on Instagram at @ShopHelloFriendo. And of course me on Instagram at AmandaMuse. Follow me in all the places. I would love it. I'm excited for what's to come. Having these little projects to work on keeps me incredibly busy, but also hopeful and inspired for what 2021 can bring, because I know it's heavy and I know it's doom and gloom, but it can't be like this forever, right? Right. So let's bring some of that sunshine back. All right, guys, thank you for listening. And like I said, there's a brand new episode out today, episode 1. Go check it out with my wonderful Friendo guest. And one more thing before I wrap it up. All of the previous sandwich episodes, they're not going anywhere. They are a moment in time, beautiful conversations I've had. I don't want those to go anywhere. So yeah, don't worry about it. You can still go back to the start. If you're just finding Friendo Podcast and you're wondering what the heck is the sandwich, they're beautiful conversations I've had since 2018. And we're just excited to just a little revamp, a little makeover on the pod, and bring you some new stuff for this year. All right, guys, thank you so much for being here. And I will catch you in my next episode. Welcome to Friendo Podcast, hosted by me, AmandaMuse. As a YouTuber, I've shared my life online for the last 8 years, And now I'm excited to learn about you. Friendo celebrates people and their stories, from interesting jobs to unique passions and curious life skills that the world should hear about. Community is everything. Let's do this. Welcome to episode 1 of Friendo Podcast, the reinvention and the pivot. Have you been there? You know, when life throws you a couple of curveballs and all of a sudden you're stuck. Somewhere between wishing things were different, feeling completely hopeless because it was out of your control, but kind of hopeful, optimistic maybe even, that things could get better. I feel like so many of us are experiencing this right now, and it is so hard for so many. You know, at its peak in the spring of 2020, COVID-19 directly affected 5.5 million Canadian workers, including 3 million who had lost their jobs and 2.5 million who were employed but then had experienced COVID-related absences from work. Like, those numbers are huge. And sometimes it helps to feel like you're not alone. Like, there's so many people going through these things at the same time. But I think it's safe to say that more often than not, it kind of doesn't help because you are in, your four walls, and it might just be you that you're taking care of, but you may have other family members that are your responsibility. And I think it's safe to say that that brings about a lot of stress. I came upon an article written by Stephanie Pappas on October 1st of 2020 through the American Psychological Association. And essentially her article was talking about the mental health impact because of all of this job loss and how significant that is to our health. So what is unemployment having to do with our mental health? How is it linked? And through her research, it's linked to anxiety, depression, and loss of life satisfaction. I mean, those are huge feelings. For some, jobs in their chosen profession may not return for some time. So there's this need to reinvent yourself. I feel like in my home, we're experiencing this firsthand. My husband, Dean, is a pilot, has been one for the last 25 plus years, and has also been out of work since March 2020. I would be lying if I just was like, yeah, everything's fine. There's been some ups, some serious downs, and I feel like right now in February of 2021, we're at a point where the pivot has commenced. Like, we don't know when the airlines are going to be back up and running. And yes, there are some, pilots working and still flying, but it's safe to say that most airlines in Canada are working on this, skeleton type of crew. I mean, I know of some airlines that have completely shut down, and we don't know when the return date is coming. And in our house, we're at this point now in February 2021 where we're starting to think about the pivot. Like, how long can a person remain unemployed? I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure there's some legal stuff around that. But also, I feel like there's so much purpose that's wrapped up with your job. And at some point, one needs to feel a sense of purpose and accomplishment at the end of the day. So here we are, looking at Dean's lifelong career, and how can we look at it in a new way? How can you take this expertise and apply it to something new, right? This is the famous pivot. I found this definition on the internet that describes the pivot in your career to be known as doubling down on what is working to make a purposeful shift in a new and related direction. So pivoting in this sense is an intentional, methodical process for nimbly navigating career changes. This is important because, we talk about it in this episode today with my Friendo guest, where I think a lot of people sometimes think they have to reinvent the wheel, but that may not be the case. You likely, in your lifelong career experience, have all sorts of tools in your toolkit that you could repurpose for something new. I think it's safe to say that we're all pivoting in some way, whether your job still exists, but it's in a new format. Are you working from home? Are you, like so many teacher friends that I have, now performing your job virtually? Has your job had to just shift to continue having a job? Did you work in a restaurant and now you're focusing on delivery food options? Like, I think there's just so many ways that jobs have changed. And how can we lean into this change? If you're looking to reinvent yourself in a similar field, or maybe do something big and make a huge shift, change is happening. It's all around how can we lean into it? Today's guest is Nicole Russell. She is the owner and sales strategist for Leaderboard Sales, a company she started during COVID. She helps entrepreneurs and businesses ditch the anxiety of selling and teaches sales strategies to turn prospects into paying customers. What intrigued me about Nicole's story is how she got to be running her own business. It wasn't overnight. These things never are. There were ups and downs. In fact, there was job loss and then even more job loss. And finally, a reinvention took place as she pivoted her career. Be sure to stick around to the end of the episode where my husband Dean and I debrief about what life has been like around here these last 11 months and where we hope to be in the future. Welcome, my Friendo guest. Welcome to the podcast, Nicole. I'm so glad you're here.
Me too. Thank you so much. I think I'm like smiling ear to ear.
I love it.
I'm just so excited. Thank you so much. It's a real honor to be with you.
But one of the things that jumped out at me from your story when I was reading your submission was this theme of reinvention. And I think that there's so many people in the last 10 months who have had to reinvent themselves, looked at what they do, small pivots, big pivots, and perhaps a lot of people are actually in a place where they're still trying to figure out what to do, right?
Absolutely.
And I mean, I will obviously let you share your story, but it's been a time for you and you're on this up and up right now. So I'm really excited to share your journey. So tell us a little bit about yourself and then we can start learning more about what you've been up to lately.
Sure. Well, I'm a dog mom. I think everybody knows that about me. I'm obsessed with my little dog, Charlie.
What kind of dog? Wait, before we proceed.
Yeah, he's a tiny English golden doodle. So he is so cute. I love him.
Cute.
And I'm a wife and I'm an entrepreneur and I work in corporate as well. So I do both, which is kind of unique. And my husband and I are DIY fixer-uppers. So people do follow us in our journey of fixing up our 1950s home and making it our own. So that's kind of fun too. And I'm so lucky. I have like amazing friends and amazing family. And so that's just a little bit about me.
I love that. And one thing that we got to tell people is that I actually met Nicole in a Walmart one time.
True story.
True story.
I boldly approached you.
I love that. And I love that I was like, I don't know what I was saying to my kids, but let's hope it was good. It's a Walmart. Things can go south in a hurry. But I love that we met like 2 years ago or something now.
Yeah.
And here we are.
And you're kind of like celebrity status. So it's funny because like if you approach someone, right, you're never really sure what the response is going to be. And you were so gracious and genuine. You're just like, hi. Yeah, hi. Right. And so you never know what you're going to get when you approach, a stranger, but you were so awesome.
Well, I'm so glad you came up and said hello. And I was also saying just before we hit record that I follow Nicole on her personal accounts on Instagram. And every now and then this beautiful face pops up. And I'm like, well, what's she up to? She lives kind of local, So, yeah. All right. So you're saying you work in corporate and you also started something new this year. So tell me a little bit about like this journey and how your experiences led to this new idea.
So I've been in sales for just over 12 years, and I never anticipated my life going in that direction. I took recreation and leisure studies at school. I took French, and the intention was really to be a teacher. And so my life didn't go in that direction. I ended up going to work in sales and marketing from the get-go, right out of school. And it's been a wild ride. I think a lot of people assume that if you take a role in sales, you're part of the revenue generation stream of any company. And so that guarantees you a very stable career. And so what I've found is that my journey, my path has been a series of ups and downs. But I always say I would never, ever trade that for the world, because there's been so many lessons that come from having to start over. So over the last 6 years, I've actually lost 3 jobs. And so you kind of get used to this reinvention and having to start over and pivot and kind of redefine yourself and find your place. And what's really interesting is that for most people, what job loss means to them is it is a loss of purpose. And I felt that really strongly in the beginning. I mean, job loss 1 versus job loss 3, lots of different emotions, very different experience. And I'm kind of one of those people that, if you met me in the mall, you'd be like, hey, Nicole, hey, what are you doing now? That's always the question, because I always have a different job. It's kind of part of my story. And I used to shy away from sharing it. There was a lot of shame, right? There's a lot of shame associated with job loss and starting over. And I had a difficult time communicating that in interviews. And I had a difficult time talking about it with family and friends, right? It's a shameful thing. I've started over so many times. But to be honest with you, it has been a blessing in my life. And I feel like I need to share the story more often so that we can kind of break through some of these barriers that come with job loss experience. So, yeah.
There's so much you mentioned there that I didn't even think about it that way. At the start when you were saying working in sales, how you're right. You would think there's job security because you're bringing in income for a company. Mm-hmm. But they're not, that isn't always the case. And there is a lot of shame with job loss. As you know, as my listeners know, Dean lost his job at the start of COVID, and that journey of purpose is very prominent. And I didn't even think about it that way. So were you impacted by job loss because of COVID?
I was. My most recent one was due to a restructuring with an organization, and a really, really poorly, a really bad hit business in COVID. And so they had to make some changes. And so it was difficult to deal with. Even the third time again, it was kind of like, okay, you grab the bottle of wine, you grab the box of Kleenex, you cry it out. And then eventually you have to pick yourself up off the ground and start over. And and so I would, love to share with your audience some of the things that I've learned by starting over again and again.
We want to hear it. Yeah.
It doesn't get easier, but it does get kind of fun. And one of the things I will say is through my years working in corporate, and I've tried to really open my eyes to free education. And so listening to podcasts is part of that. Reading books is a really big part of that. And somebody really influential, I don't even know him, and I don't make any commission by saying this, but a really great influence for me over the last few years has been Donald Miller. And he runs this podcast, and he has this amazing business Made Simple in Nashville. And I've been reading his books over the course of the years, and some of the things that he mentions in the books really help fundamentally when people are trying to get themselves back in the job market. So one of those things is, do you perceive yourself as a value-driven employee, right? So can you articulate in an interview what you bring to the table in terms of generating revenue for a company? And if you're not in sales, your brain might not operate that way, because if you're in HR, for example, you might think to yourself, okay, how does an HR professional generate revenue for a company? But if you dissect it, well, turnover in organizations is very costly. And so, of course, you generate revenue for a company. You save money for the company. So one of the things I learned from him was, do you see yourself as a value-driven employee? So that's one of the things I do. I do believe that for myself, and I hope everyone else does. The second thing is do you fall into the victim mentality? Right. And I can say I honestly did before. Like I said, job loss 1 versus job loss 3, very different. The first time over, yeah, I was down in the dumps, try to pick me up off the ground. I thought I was useless. No one's going to want me anymore. My career's over. How do I explain what happened? Right. And so I kind of had to get myself out of that and see myself as the hero instead of the victim. Right.
That
And
is
so that's
huge.
really,
Huge.
really helpful starting over.
Oh my God. And it's, what do they say? Like, I'm just pulling things from the air right now, but like top stressors of life is like,
Yeah.
death in the family, losing your job, like it's up there, right?
It's up
Like,
there.
so you're absolutely right. Like how you see your value and what you're bringing and like keeping that strong and firm and then being able to like look at a situation like rationally, like this happened because of this and this. And yes, I'm part of it, but it's not me and my character.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
Oh, I love this. This is great advice. What else you got? Bring it.
What else you got? I took notes because I was like, don't forget anything. I really feel very strongly about, being able to bring value to the table, right? Obviously. We just went through
Exactly.
that. And so having a growth mindset too really helps. So do you come from a place of abundance or scarcity, right? So I had to work really hard on that one. I was definitely more of a person that there's not enough room for me. I'm not maybe good enough. And maybe that stems from, I have great parents, by the way, but maybe that's, maybe that's a little bit about how I grew up. Right. So I had to get over that. And I had to really come from a place of abundance. There's room for everyone. And I will find something at the end of this. Something will come of this. Right. And you often hear about people talking about setbacks lead to, setting you up for success. And honestly, it does work that way. I want to give people hope that if you are going through job loss right now, I promise you there's a silver lining. It always shows itself and it may not be immediate. It might be down the road, but it does come and it comes in weird forms too. And then also when you're, if you're out there looking for a new job, think of yourself as an intrapreneur. So what that means is like entrepreneurs, they run the show, right? They wear all the hats. You can do the same thing for a corporate organization. You just have to be able to see yourself as an entrepreneur. And one of the things I did I'm a young woman, but as a younger woman, I learned about business acumen a little bit. A great leader I had, she told me, one of the differentiators between a good hire and a mediocre hire is somebody that understands just the basics of business. You don't have to be like a CEO or have like an MBA, but just know the basics of business, how money is made and, what does a P&L report stand for, profit and loss report? Just know the basics, right? So I set my sights on that. And don't be afraid to ask for help. It's amazing what can happen when you lean into your circle and what can happen when you lean into the connections you have on LinkedIn, right? You just need to ask for help and people will come. Like if you've treated people right throughout your career, they will be there for you when times are tough.
Did you know we've released a shop where you can support Friendo? Check out hellofriendo.com and explore. That's HELLOFRIENDO.com and shop mugs, shirts, stickers, hoodies, and more. We're constantly adding new goodies for you. Your purchase directly supports the show and the work involved in creating it for your ears. So thank you. Check out hellofriendo.com. All right, back to the show. One of the things I found really interesting about your story is you said, you kind of launched yourself into the world thinking you might become a teacher. And then you fell into sales. And this is probably, I would assume, your natural skill set makes you really great at this. And so rather than fight all of these concepts that other people might have for you, you went in a direction that worked. And you have started a business since, all of this. And I
Yeah.
I definitely want to mention what you're doing because you took all of your skills and was like, wait a second, there's something here. And you don't have to pivot like this hard pivot. Sometimes it's like, well, I can just go boop, and like take everything I've learned and acquired over the years and offer this amazing business to people. So what have you changed now? You experienced this job loss. You, like you said, it's been, the feelings are different from the first to the third. So what have you started?
So I started a sales consulting company, and I now get to help entrepreneurs and small business owners. I get to help them. I get to teach them the sales strategies that are going to improve their business and grow their business. And it's really about the reason why I created Leaderboard Sales is because I saw this huge gap in the market. I was watching entrepreneurs, and I come from a pretty entrepreneurial family as well. So my sister is an entrepreneur, and her husband, and even like my in-laws, right? So I could see that there was a gap. People are very educated and well-versed in a lot that comes with inbound sales. So what I mean by that is like content creation and building an audience for themselves to get leads to come to them. But then they get a little bit uncomfortable and anxious when they have to go seek out new business when they want to scale. So things that salespeople do really, really well is they understand how to go and prospect for new business. Because if we don't do that, we're at risk of losing our jobs, right? Not bringing in revenue, there's no room for you at the table. Also, we know how to do really great discovery. So we know how to ask the right questions. We know how to do the open-ended questions really well. We know how to dig and get those pain points, right? And entrepreneurs, some of them will have that skill, but a lot of them have a difficult time with it. Another thing is entrepreneurs, they have to understand that when you're selling, so oftentimes you have to create proposals, and they may not have done that. So an example I like to use is for someone that goes to trade school, let's say for plumbing. And so they go and they learn this trade and they master it. And now they got to go out into the world and make some money. And so oftentimes they create, their own business. Well, I'm going to create my own company, Nicole's Plumbing. And then I'm stuck. How the heck do I get customers, right? And so another thing that salespeople do really well is they understand the value of using a CRM system, a customer relationship management system. And entrepreneurs, some people don't even know what CRM stands for, right? So this is the reason why I created Leaderboard is I saw some of those gaps and I saw some of the pain points that were really real for entrepreneurs. I wanted to have a space where I supported them in that. And I helped take away some of the anxiety that comes along with selling. So that was really the vision that I have for the company.
This is incredible because I see a lot of creatives. So I see a lot of that side of the world where they've got this genius idea. They've got this thing, this product that they can sell. And I'm like, oh my God, like that's amazing. That's something that's weird on what I do is there isn't necessarily a product, although there is now. I do have a shop, but neither here nor there. But it took some time to get there. But I see a lot of people, and you're right. It's like you've got this great idea, you have this interesting product, but then there's a stop, and it's like I don't know how to get to that next level. I don't know how to sell my stuff without feeling like a sellout. And
yeah, exactly.
Right. And it comes back to that value as well. Like, do you believe in what you're doing and like not doubting yourself? I think half the battle in being a business owner is that constant like hyping yourself up. Like you are bringing something to people. It's like you need those like little pieces of paper everywhere to remind yourself. And there totally is that gap. And especially in a time where the gig economy is bigger than ever. And so many people have a side hustle, right? Have this little side gig. And how do they do this? And, interesting that you mentioned you tailor to smaller businesses. Like that's a wonderful thing as well, because when you're just starting out, you may not necessarily recognize what you're missing and what you need. And that there are people like you out there to help you build what you've got. We're going to link everything in the show notes if you're watching, so you can check out Nicole and where to follow her and find her. So You mentioned you come from a family of entrepreneurs, and how did you feel when you like? It sounds like you just started a business, like it's like so easy, right? Like I bet there was some harder times. Like, what did that journey look like? How did you hype yourself up enough to do that, to believe in yourself, support, all of that?
Well, not only did I start over a bajillion times in my career, but I've also been like this serial entrepreneur trying to find my lane. So when I was younger, like I just randomly created like a company called Growl and Grin, where I took pictures of animals, and it was actually really cool. And I had customers, and I was really young. I was in my early 20s. And my husband and I, we had this like vision where we were going to be like the next Chip and Jo. And we were going to do like another fixer upper in Canada, because people kept saying, wow, your work's so great. And we do great work. I'm not saying we don't. We ended up incorporating a company, and I joke with him and say it's our little nonprofit because we created this company and things had shifted around for him and his career, and for mine too. And it just, the timing wasn't right, but we have this little baby corporation that we're still excited about it. We still talk about Summit Hill all the time and what it could become. Right. So I think part of it is like, if you come from a background where you're free to dream and just free to be and invent and be creative, I think I get it from my dad, because my dad is a writer. He's a songwriter. He was a teacher. And he just allowed us to be free in our creativity. As kids, like we did all the, the sports that were a little bit more artsy, like figure skating and dance, right? So we were expressive. And I think that plays into people who want to be entrepreneurial, because they want to create, they want to do something, and they want to offer something to the world and get validation that they are heard and that what they're offering is valid, right? They need to be able to support people. So yeah, I think that's kind of where it stems from.
I love that. You can have these little dreams, and dreaming, I think, is not, it doesn't always come easy to a lot of people. And I think you had mentioned earlier, abundance and scarcity. And I think it comes down to a lot of that, like if you grew up in a house where it's paycheck to paycheck, how you see money, how you see ideas. I mean, it can be harder to see beyond that,
Absolutely.
And what you're, how your parents, create. Did they create things? Did you get to see that? I think that there's so much of that trickles in there. I read something like, I can't remember which cajillionaire was like, if you can have your kids start a business, just to experience the start and sometimes fail of a business and what that looks like and all the little intricacies, and believe in yourself enough to give something a go. Like it can really, because I think it's like anything, like once you have one experience, now you have a baseline of what that felt like. And coming back to the job loss thing, like you said, the third time around, it was probably less of like, I'm not worthy, and more like, oh, here we go again. Why are we here? And is this the time that I like launch my thing, this concept that I've been dreaming of?
That played into it a lot. Like another reason why I created Leaderboard Sales was because I didn't always want to rely on a corporation to build my skill set. And I knew that the position I was in probably wasn't being given enough opportunity. I thought to myself, I think I'm built for more. Like, can I even say that out loud? Right? It feels like you're kind of like, oh, I'm got a big head, but I kept hearing from people like, you need to do something, and I had a great job and I loved it. And I supported people, and it was in their sales, and it was great, but it wasn't enough. And I needed more, and I needed it not just for my ego, because ego plays into things too, but it wasn't for ego. It was to prove to myself that I had this skill set and I didn't have to rely on a company to be able to give me those opportunities. So I think that's really important for people to realize that a business isn't just always a vehicle for making money. It's a vehicle for you to improve yourself, right? And that's what it comes down to.
So tell me more about leaderboard sales. Like, what is it that you're offering your clients when they come to your Instagram page or they hop over to your website? Like, what would be a way that you help people?
Well, first and foremost, I think, education is a really big part of it, right? Because people are scared even by the word sales. So what I'm trying to do is educate my community that sales doesn't always have to be so Wolf of Wall Street. And so I'm trying to humanize the sales experience and have people understand that just because you got a cold outreach message, and those are messages that come to your DMs or your email inboxes completely at random, and they don't speak to you. That doesn't have to be your experience with how you sell your product, right? So first and foremost, it's a place where people can get educated. And it's also a place where people can get coaching. So if they're stuck with something, if they're stuck with a specific topic, maybe it's, a big one, I'll be honest with you, a big topic is this idea of cold outreach. So how do I go and approach people to bring business to me instead of relying on them to find me, to interact with me, right? So the inbound sales world, where it's, blogging, content creation, SEO, all that stuff is noisy. It is noisy. And so people are really trying to break through the noise and find their place where they can now showcase their products or their services in a way that doesn't feel slimy. And so that's really the idea behind it, is to show that you can do self-promotion. You can tell people to join your email list or join your course that's coming up and not feel so shameful about it. There's nothing wrong with sharing, but there is a strategy behind it. And with the right coaching and the right tools, you can start to do these and implement them into your business and get more customers.
I was on your Instagram yesterday or the day before, and you had, I think it was a live or a video where you had, that type of thing. It was this email that you received. Somebody was kind of cold emailing you. And there were so many things that I was nodding my head. Like, it's like you said, it's business concepts that are not specific to one industry. It can be applied to so many things. And you're right. Like, you had said one thing, and it was, the person said, "Hey," and like, didn't say hi, Nicole, or, and that might seem crazy or silly, but like, if I see something where my name's not in it, I'm not kidding, I delete the email right away. Like, exactly. I'm like, was this a newsletter email? Like, how did I even end up on this? Who is this? Like you said, your back is instantly up. And I was look at me getting tips from myself, like, as I'm watching her Instagram. And it's these small things that you might not think about, because maybe you are like maybe you're a candle maker and that is where you excel at, and you're trying to sell these candles, and now you have to learn about this business side of it. And this is where going to experts it's never going to be a bad thing to learn something new. And I always love to tell people, like, stay coachable, stay open, like, try not to get too defensive when you realize you don't know something. Like,
absolutely,
it's only going to bring more to you the more you learn, right? But it really is sometimes that coaching and, coaching and sales, they can kind of be words that maybe frighten people, but you're right. It's like, the more you learn about it, the more you feel in control of it, because you're like, you get it. And these small little techniques. And I do find too, what's great is like these bite-sized things, like these little bite-sized moments and interactions you have with someone like yourself. To me, that's what sits in my brain, because it's like you kind of store it away. And then you're like, oh, as you go to type that next email to whomever, you're like, I'm going to implement these little strategies that I just picked up last week. So it is those little moments at times that you haven't even thought about, because you've written that email 35 times. Exactly. Maybe you haven't had as much interaction from said email, right?
Exactly.
Do you do like packages for people, or do you do one-on-one? Like, what's your preferred method?
Yeah, so I do one-on-one coaching sessions, and I also offer like sales strategy sessions. So one of the things I didn't want to do with the company was I didn't want to lock anybody into like a long-term coaching package because that might not be what they want. So really, if somebody reaches out to me, I'm always very open with them that we will only really tackle what you need to tackle. And that's probably my sales background because we only really ever explored the issue at hand. We were, trained, and it was drilled into us to get the pain points and then to figure out the solution for them. So I run the company the same way. So if you jump on a discovery call with me, you know that I'm only really going to put forward what I think is really reasonable to fix this one challenge that you're having. If that leads into other opportunities, that's great. But we want to be able to focus on fixing that one thing that's really kind of your hang up, right? And then also I offer what's called these intensives. So sometimes businesses will not really know what the disconnect is. Maybe they've gotten some advice over the years, they've built up a great company, but they're like, something's off. One of the things that salespeople do really well is they can go in to a situation and kind of dissect and pick it apart. And I've done that in a lot of my corporate roles where I've gone in and gone, here's the issue right there, right? And so it's kind of like being like a detective. Like you look for cues and clues, you ask the right questions, and eventually that's going to pretty well come to light. It's usually process driven. With sales and revenue, it's usually like something's at a joint. It's a process. I'm also really big on customer experience. So I'm also trying to build up that side of the business because from my time in sales, one of the companies I've worked for in the past, they really took that very, very seriously. And what we saw was when you really focus on the customer experience, all of a sudden your sales revenue starts going way up. And so there are little factors that you can tweak in your business that you may not be aware of. So one-on-one coaching, the intensives, and then I'm also working on online courses because I know a lot of people want to just learn at their own pace. So I'm developing a program right now that's designed for people who want to find, grow, and keep great customers. So how do you go after them? How do you build a prospect list? Like some people don't know where to start, right? So how do you build a prospect list? How do you create great messaging where you're really, really clear on your delivery from exactly what you want, right? And then take it one step further. How do you do meaningful follow-up? So my customers always laugh at me because I have this like thing that I'm like obsessed with. So my thing is you don't do outreach without research. So you never reach out to someone going in blind. That's a big no-no. And further to that, you never do follow-up without reason. So I see a lot of mistakes happening where people will just, maybe they'll send like a follow-up email to someone like, hey, just following up. Like what not to do. So the training is all based around these principles that as salespeople, like we've been trained, right? This is like it's not a university course, but I've worked with fabulous organizations that were so gracious in giving me the best training. And I have a CSP designation, which means that I went through like a pretty robust sales training program that you have to like pass an exam and all that stuff. So yeah, that's my vision, is that I can bring the knowledge that I've acquired over the years that's really helped me grow business for companies and help small businesses do the same thing for themselves.
And I love that part about like laser focusing on what specific need that business has, because it's like, like you've done all the work. You're like, well, I can tell you from the information, I'll just pick it out, like the information that you need and share it with you. Because I think this is where how you take your business to the next level is, or just anything, is like you need to outsource. You need help from others. Like in my specific field, I know that things changed dramatically for me when I hired and started partnering up with a sales team for me, when I got help and got an editor, when I've had different people over the years come in who are experts in what they do and help me visualize myself as a business and where I can take it to the next level. And it's all these little things, like, and it is definitely working with people who have the tools. And like you said, it may not be this long-term partnership, but having someone come in and just take a look at that one part of your business can really change it. So here, we started this conversation talking about how wild job loss can be and how you can lose your sense of purpose and value, and how important it is. Like, I feel like listening to your story and having chatted with you, it's you get this idea where I think sometimes that people, when they do experience a job loss or and that purpose starts to become questionable, they sometimes think they have to shift gears entirely and like go do something new, because obviously I lost that job because I'm terrible at it, right? And you can doubt yourself. But what I love about your story is you took all of these things that you've learned over the years and packaged it up beautifully to do what you do best and share that with people who could use that help. And I think it's such a great message. I feel like certain people in my life who've lost jobs lately where I'm like, stop reinventing the wheel. Like, you are great at this. You have this many years experience. Repackage it, look, what could you offer in the same field, in that same industry that you've been in your whole career, and how can you share that with people? So I think it's just a great story. And guess what I was wondering is, did you have advice for people who are experiencing hardship right now? I know you mentioned a little bit about the silver lining comes, but it might not show up right away. Like, what advice would you offer people who maybe just lost their job and are wondering what the heck they're going to do next?
Yeah. So, lean into your network. So anyone that you've worked with previously, let them know your situation. I talked about it online and people were responding to me like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're talking about this. Like, I lost my job 3 months ago. There's no way I would tell my audience that that's the problem. But when you talk about it, when you're not feeling that shame about it, you're looking for a new opportunity. I'm open. And I know it sounds cheesy. So some people will just be like, okay, no, I'm not doing that. I would walk around the block with my dog and I would listen to podcasts that were uplifting, and I would try to put myself in a positive space. And when I just had some time on the walk that was quiet, I would just say, I'm ready to receive. I'm getting emotional. Woo.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm ready to receive. Because job loss is really intense.
You're going to make me cry now. Dang it.
Sorry.
But it is. It's super intense.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of people who, like you said, I feel like when you visualize, when you're ready to receive, it's like you're looking forward and you're like, I'm ready,
I'm ready.
But for people who are like doubt, it's like you're looking backwards at like what could have been. How could I change what just happened? But you can't, right? And how can you be ready? You. Absolutely. How can, oh my gosh. And in a time where like so many people are trying to figure this out, right?
Yeah. I'd also say too, Amanda, like, you can't fear recruiters. I've always said that to people. People now know that I'm like the job loss queen. So they'll approach me and be like, what do I do? One of the biggest things I always tell people is don't run away from them. Like, they have a job to do. They always, for the most part, they have your best interest at heart. Like, they're salespeople, but again, they're not bad salespeople. They have a job to do. They have a role to fill, and you might be that person to fill that role. And it could be a great career path for you. So just be open to conversations. If somebody approaches you about a career, because this has happened to me before, where someone, the phone rings, like, oh my God, you should apply to this job. This is so cool. I think this is so great for you. Where that's an honor and a privilege. And so if somebody is bringing opportunities to you, answer the call. You have to answer the call, and you may be surprised. It may be totally outside your wheelhouse, but you need to answer the call. So just be open to receive, lean into your network, talk about it. I know it sucks and I got teary and emotional, but you got to talk about it, because people will have your back. If you've been there for people along your career, the moment you need a hand, I guarantee you those people will be really quick to take your resume and put it in the hands of the right people.
It's such good advice. This was a wonderful conversation. I love your positivity and your expertise that shines through. And I really hope that after listening to this episode, people come over to your page and,
Absolutely.
you're thinking about starting a business. You're in the midst of being a business owner. You could use a little help. I mean, I know I picked up something from one Instagram live and one little video. So
Good.
you're bound to learn something, and you have wonderful energy and presence. So I wish you all the best on your new venture. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate it. You're a boss, babe. Thank you so much.
Welcome to the Debrief with Dean portion of the podcast, where, we're going to be basically just talking a little bit about the topic and how it sort of relates back to our life. And I get to include you in the podcast, which is fun.
Yeah, it is fun, isn't it?
So today with our guest, Nicole, I spoke to her about reinventing yourself after job loss and more job loss, which I think is so relevant right now with COVID and just good life advice, and then having to pivot when that's necessary. And I think, throughout the conversation, there was a lot of discussion about shame, the shame associated with job loss. And it's been a bit of a weird year. And I mentioned, and you guys know, if you've been around for a little bit, that you, my love, have lost your job in the last 11 months.
Yeah.
And you've probably lost your job in the past before too, and had weird things happen at work. So what's your thoughts on all of this topic?
Well, when I listened to Nicole's podcast, the first thing I realized is that, you're not, I'm not, other people aren't alone in the feeling because of losing their job. Because, you don't realize how much someone is suffering through that type of loss, because how often do we experience the losses like we've had in the last year? And a lot of people just like, when it's over, it's over. And you associate a lot of your life with the job that you do. You go to a party, some friends you haven't seen for a while. Oh, what are you doing now? What are you doing now? And when I was listening to Nicole, I've been in that position where, you've just changed jobs, or the job has changed for you. And like, what do you say? Yeah, I'm on to the next thing. And you start to look like a little bit of a goofball after a while. Like, what's wrong with that person? They can't hold a steady job. And I think for people like Nicole, she's a very dynamic woman. Amazing to listen to her speak. I was just like, so to kind of delve into it a little bit, is this number one, I'm glad that she spoke about that loss and the emotions that she's gone through. And number two, she brought up the coaching aspect of it. And this one particularly kind of hits me right in the heart, because I have never really done any other job since I was very, very young. And you start to feel like, you're a one-trick pony. You don't know how to do anything else. And
like the pivot seems impossible.
The pivot
you're
seems,
like,
well,
I've done this one thing.
It's for me, you kind of would go through the motion. You're like, okay, pivot your life. Boom. And then you're like, yeah, now what do I do?
But I love what she's doing to help small businesses and help them get to that next level and help bring their business to that place.
Yeah.
But I guess, one of the things that she mentioned, and maybe it's harder to talk about, is like, have you felt that lack of value or purpose in your life in the last little bit?
At first, it didn't really hit me, because, as like you're kind of just in the is it a honeymoon stage? You're in that stage of like, oh, I just lost my job. Okay. Well, we have some money and savings and everything, so everything's cool. But then it comes to it that you kind of, you really feel the loss after a while. And then you really find the next part of it is that, what am I supposed to do now? And your mind just goes through over and over and over scenarios like, what am I supposed to be doing? How am I supposed to be doing it? And especially now, like with my particular job, half the pilots or more than half the pilots on Earth are out of work. So when she was talking about going to, your people and your networks and people that you've treated right, they'll always be there for you. Yes, that's true. That's very, very true. But sometimes you're in a position where even your colleagues have lost their job.
Right.
And now, everybody's in the same pot together. So, but
And I think,
yeah.
To add to that, it's like sometimes when you go to your people, it could be industry people, but it could also be people in your life. So when I was looking at your example, and current situation, it's like here you have 25 plus years of experience in a particular industry, but it's very specific experience and it's very technical experience, and the whole industry is impacted. So you can't just like go to another airline or like jump on another plane real quick. Like it doesn't work that fast. But then I was thinking in terms of the pivot, like how can you take this expertise and just move it into something else? And so, for those of you who might not know, I've got a special project that I'm working with Dean on taking some of this pilot thing and this pilot gig and making it into maybe something like a podcast that you guys might enjoy. But you might not have come to that without tapping into your people, which is I'm one of those people, and going, hold on, like you have all of this skill set. How can you use this just in a different way?
And that's where you have to bring in outside people that
and
you trust, or a coach, or a mentor.
Exactly. And here's Nicole, who worked in different areas of sales for the last how many years, and then finally realized, wait a second, like this is my thing. This is what I'm good at. I'm going to turn this into a gig and I'm going to help other people.
Yeah.
Like, I just think it's so inspiring.
It was very inspiring. I actually have to say that when I listened to that, it made me feel better.
Guys, he's been talking about it. He listened to it yesterday afternoon, and it's been simmering, and we've been having some really great conversations since. And I just think it's such a wonderful perspective in a very difficult time.
It is. And the particular thing is right now everybody needs, hope in their jobs. And I find that one thing that I'm not addressing with mine is that times have changed, and my job is not the job that people think it is. It used to be some, wow, amazing type job, but you're just you're a worker, you're a driver, and nobody's looking for your level of expertise no one's really looking at your expertise as much as they're just looking to fill the position. And I think when you're in a workplace like that,
like highly competitive, right? Because there's so many pilots and very few jobs.
It used to be the opposite way, where like you could walk out and you could get a job like just before the pandemic. I mean, people are just crying for it. But the other thing too is that it's an industry that's changing, and you could for instance, let's say you flown a certain type of airplane. Well, you could have 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 hours on it, but the people that hiring you want you to be current within the last 12 months on that particular aircraft. Even though you have many, many, many type ratings and you've flown the type and whatever, they don't want you unless you're ready to plug and play.
Which is nearly impossible.
Right to keep all these types. So What I'm saying is that I think when you're looking at industries changing like that they just want to, they just want employees. They're not interested in the quality anymore. It's more about just keeping the ball rolling. I can see that's happened in aviation quite a bit, but I wouldn't have looked at it that way had I not been laid off.
Mm-hmm. And I think like you and I, obviously I'm not the one who's lost my job. So I'm coming at it from a very different angle.
Yeah.
I still have all of the purpose, all of the work, all of the things. So I'm not in that same place. But what I find, and the messaging I got from this conversation was like, let's say I'm an artist and I was making money off of commissioned work, but right now that's not happening. How can I take my skill set and maybe turn it into something else? Like, you're not coming completely away from your passion and your niche,
right?
But you're finding new ways to look at it, dusting it off, smoothing out some corners. Can I maybe offer courses? Can I put together a how-to? Like, I don't know, and I think
that's the thing is that what I was getting at is basically like, not only have you lost your job now, your job might be completely gone for the next 6 months or up to 4 or 5 years. You don't know. So at that point, you're kind of looking at it going, well, if it opens up now, should I really even go back anyway? Will there be the quality of life? Because in my particular industry, I mean, every time there's SARS, COVID, MERS, avian flu, whatever,
you're impacted.
You're impacted.
First,
it's like
the first group is like, you're out, sit down over there, you know? Exactly. And it's
Right.
like, and we were talking about like looking at jobs that have longevity, that are indestructible.
Right.
Like, what is that? And then how can you maybe think about those things? How do you dream about those things? And again, coming back to the conversation with Nicole, it was like, there is free education out there. Dina has a foot in the door because I know how to podcast. But if you didn't have somebody who knew how to podcast, you could figure it out. Like, the information is out there. And it's like, don't be afraid to grieve and mourn the trauma of losing your job and feeling like you're having to start over. And don't be afraid to then take the next step, which is reinvention, finding new purpose, pivoting if you need to, like taking that next step, because you just don't know. So I thought it was really hopeful.
Yeah, I really liked her.
I enjoyed it.
I would actually, you know what? She's that was your first guest.
My first one.
But that's someone that, I would love to listen to more of her speak on this subject, because it's such a valuable resource to have people like that are in the know about pivoting and if you're a business becoming profitable or changing where you need to change. I just feel that, you have to leave the past behind in some instances, and you need a guide to do that.
Totally. Well, thanks guys for listening. We hope you enjoyed first episode of Friendo Podcast, and we'll catch you next week with another one.
Yeah. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Friendo Podcast is produced and hosted by me, AmandaMuse. Music on this episode is written by Chris Bevins and Mike Payne, performed and produced by MP Real Glow. If you'd like to help support the growth of Friendo Podcast, you can do so by leaving a positive review, sharing the podcast with your friends and community, and supporting the shop at hellofriendo.com. Find us on Instagram at shophellofriendo. And thank you for listening. And remember, be your own bird.